Okay, so I think everyone can hear us, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Katrina Handley, and I'm the Project Director for the Transport Portfolio at Terrapin. Welcome to today's webinar, which we are running in association with PaxLife. Our host today, Ralph Cabos, will explore how rail operators can leverage IT networks to expand passenger experience and unlock new revenue. Today's webinar is live, and Ralph will be more than happy to answer any questions you may have at the end of the presentation, and you can submit questions at any point when they come to you. So without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce Ralph, who will be leading today's session.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Good afternoon, everyone. As Katrina mentioned, my name is Ralph. I'm the CEO of PaxLife Innovations. We are based in Potsdam, close to Berlin. And in fact, our company is focused on integrating commercial applications on board of trains. So our core business is in fact to give you tools into your hands so that any commercial application that you otherwise find hosted in the web, you could host or at least leverage upon in your trains. And our background has in fact been aerospace for quite a long time, and since 2019 we are deploying to the rail industry. In the meantime, we are entirely working in rail only, and so today this is really a presentation about leveraging IT networks, IP-based applications into trains to improve passenger experience and generate some ancillary revenues. A little bit of our background: our launching customer has been Ostdeutsche Eisenbahn, ODEC. It's a regional rail operator in East Germany. We have been working for other clients. Some of them are not yet listed because projects are underway, and we're exploring new kind of application designs with those clients, but you'll probably hear more about that later this year. Let's go one step further and take a closer look at what it means to integrate digital applications into the train. Maybe just a few introductory words. First of all, I mean, we all know how much smartphones have changed our life, not just our life, but the life of our passengers as well. Whatever we do in our life revolves around the smartphone. If we look at travel-related matters, we will explore our travel ideas on smartphones, on applications, on apps in the browser. We will probably ticket in the application using the smartphone. We'll find out about the timetable. And probably if there is some feedback to be given, we will be using the smartphone during the travel or after the travel as well. So it is quite normal that if you look at this experience chain, passenger experience is revolving around the smartphone, and that obviously has been picked up by practically all of the operators by way of providing their own applications or web applications, by providing e-ticketing, etc., etc. Now, once the passengers are on board, finally one thing typically changes, and this is that at the time when the passengers enjoy the core rail product, in fact, the focus is more on, well, can they use their smartphone? But then we are looking at providing Wi-Fi normally, or some kind of connectivity, such that they can use their smartphone, but use the smartphone to leave the train. So they're actually leaving the experience that we are providing for them on board of the train. Of course, you may argue that, okay, there is a portal sometimes that is offered and portal-related services, but with the exception of, let's say, travel information, the take-up is not so brilliant. And even though there is entertainment services sometimes offered, also, if we are honest and we look at the number of users, it really pales in comparison with what passengers really do with their smartphones. And this is in fact using it to watch their own movies, using it for streaming services, etc. So the obvious question is then, if the life revolves around the smartphone, if already we are providing improved internet access to the passenger by way of the infrastructure I provide, or maybe sometimes the SIM card is sufficient and the passenger can just use the smartphone through the window or whatsoever. The question is, would it be possible that while the passenger is traveling on board of the train, I leverage on that infrastructure I have, let's say in the form of Wi-Fi, and endorse and host, let's say, local vendors, or represent the applications, or not represent, enable the applications of local tourist promotion agencies, or in fact not discourage passengers from streaming because it brings down my Wi-Fi, but the actual opposite, encourage the passenger and make it easy for them to stream their favorite movies, or in fact sell things, etc., etc. So today, what I would like to focus on is exactly this. What can we do to add to the infrastructure that is already on the train, and how can we complement additional digital services in the best way to improve passenger experience. How can this look like? On the following screen, we have a couple of examples. Some of these will probably be like your passenger experience will look like. You may have a landing portal that also nicely displays, let's say, on your passenger smartphone. You will have the passenger information system, probably visible on the smartphone as well. You will have a moving map, etc., etc. So this is kind of the standard offering. You probably, and this is the second example, have other services that the passengers could use through the portal. But then, of course, once, and this is the third example, once the passenger decides, well, I would like to watch my favorite streaming operator, they will actually leave your passenger experience. And in fact, the question then is really, would it be possible to offer additional services all within the context of your local onboard train experience? So before I explain how this could be done, the big question then, of course, is how do these applications get on board? Because if all we do is we tell passengers, okay, you can use Amazon, you can use this and that, go to the cloud. Well, actually, there's no difference whether I'm on board and buying the ticket on your operation or whether I'm at home, which is nice to a certain respect. But ideally, we would like to encourage people and give them the feeling that I'm traveling on the train, so I have a special service that I'm enjoying. And for this, we have created what we call RailStack. RailStack is a cloud edge hosting platform that focuses especially on effectively hosting on board commercial applications in about the same way as a web shop would normally work on your favorite smartphone. So such that rail operators themselves can install third-party digital services, deploy and operate them on your train. And on the next slide, we'll see how this, in fact, works technically inside the train. So on the one hand side, you have this little symbol in terms of the computer where it says RailStack Edge. This is normally where your router is based, your Wi-Fi router is based. You would normally have a server for your portal, a server for your entertainment offering. And on that server, you would host the cloud edge, or what we call the RailStack. The RailStack we can deliver to you simply as a software, so you can just embed it into the train as you have it today. Or in fact, there's other ways also possible. We can deliver it in the form of a rail certified server with CDN functions and other capabilities inside, or together with partners, we could in fact deliver it as a single server that also acts as a router, provides your Wi-Fi, everything in one box. But we are not really a hardware or system provider per se. As I said, we focus on integrating the applications on board. And on that Rails stack server, in fact, you can then consider the commercial applications. Let's say you are enabling, for example, Amazon Prime, to take a complex example, or any other streaming operator, Viaplay, for example, in Scandinavia, and make their services available on board at the same time as having your own app or your own application work on board, as well as maybe even have passenger-facing applications that are delivered on an IP basis. In fact, if you have IP-capable cameras on board and audio, together with our partners, we can provide you an all-IP train, where effectively you have a dual redundant hosting server, and it does the entire trick of delivering passenger-related functionality. But this is not the topic of today's presentation. So let me come back to the question of passenger experience and how to potentially generate additional revenues. So on the next page, you see, in fact, how the deployment looks like. There is a user interface that pretty much looks like a IT console, you can say. As a rail operator, you select which fleet, which vehicle, which train line you are deploying certain services. You may have certain short services where you have a different functional offering than, let's say, longer distance services. And it doesn't really matter what you're deploying. And the best part of that is that this hosting environment is, in fact, open, entirely open, not just technically open, but also commercially open, which means that, let's suppose you start with this thing and you have some brilliant application from another vendor you like. Well, you just put it onto your train. It's a standard hosting paradigm that everyone in the industry follows. So this is element one, how to enable generic applications to run on your train such that you are more flexible, you're versatile, you're future-proof, you maximize passenger engagement, you can quickly switch to other services if the old ones don't work, and most importantly, you have a simple and easy integration the same way as software integration works on your smartphone today. And of course, it now depends on which services to deploy if you want to look at the topic of today's presentation, which is passenger experience and additional revenue streams. So let's take a closer look at one of the two things we could propose, and this is the focusing on the entertainment infrastructure. We have created a group of services that is called Content Delivery Network, CDN, PAC Streams, that is for live streaming TV most predominantly, and DAB+, which is for live streaming radio on board of the train. So next page. If we then take a look at the example, what we would be able to do is, in fact, if we look at this third example of the screen, now instead of having the passenger leave your train digitally when they switch to a streaming provider, putting load on your Wi-Fi infrastructure, in this case, you would encourage your passenger to stay on board by using the streaming. So let's take this example. You would, in this case, partner with a streaming provider. On this example picture, it's an RTL-based service. We're working with RTL, for example. So let's say if you partner with RTL, the passenger can use their native app. We can enable the system such that while you watch your movie, you can still have relevant passenger information popping up or being visible on the side of the application, while at the same time you actually have a benefit, because instead of before, where you actually spend money to buy content and load movies to your train, you're actually leaving that work to your professional partner, who is your streaming partner, who pays for their own content. And you enjoy the benefit of having movies on board that everyone can enjoy, also non-subscribers. This is the important part. While at the same time, For those who are subscriber to the service, they actually will not put additional load onto your external land train Wi-Fi network. So I need to say a few technical words about why that is so. So what does the CDN actually do? So I'm sorry about this little graphic. It's a bit complicated. Let me explain the key points. You have the little smartphone in the center. The smartphone is a passenger, or let's say it's a tablet or whatever it is. It's a passenger on board of your train. The black box around it is your train. You have the cell phone tower to the top right-hand side, which is the landside mobile network. And the thin green line effectively represents the bandwidth that you would normally provide to your passenger along the path of the journey. Let's say you have a bit more powerful landside network like 5G on high frequencies, etc. Then the line gets a bit wider and there's more bandwidth pumped to the train, which is the cell phone tower on the top left. But it's still not a lot of bandwidth if you consider, let's say you run a long distance service, have 600, 700 passengers on board, and have, let's say, 50–60% streaming. This is actually not good news to your land train network. It has to be pretty sophisticated and will cost you quite a bit. Now, what CDN does is it creates these yellow arrows in the center in the train, so it creates extra local bandwidth if you want. And the way this works is that for the streaming providers that the CDN supports, we get the information from the streaming provider what are the top 5% of the movies that are requested today that take up 95% of the delivery bandwidth. These movies we cache locally, invisibly to the application on board of the train once, so it's loaded to the train once, and no matter how many times the movie is requested. In fact, the native application is then fetching the data on board from the train server instead of going outside. Yet, if I'm the statistical 5% that is left over, so I'm selecting a movie that is not in the top 5% of the most favorite ones, it will still work. In that case, obviously, I use the landside network. So this type of technology has been developed over the last years, and you've probably seen the logo on the first page, which is this EU 5G Victory project. This is the project that we've been involved with to validate the technology together with German public TV, and in fact trialing it on a Deutsche Bahn train. So this is actually revenue functionality that is also getting deployed to private railway operators. What do you need to do to bring this to your train? Well, it's pretty simple. You just get the software from us to install to your server. That's the simplest solution. You could buy a box and get the box with the software, but you can also install it to your server if you have enough capacity left. Then you obviously need to tell your passengers on board that on board of your train, let's say Prime Video is supported or RTL is supported or Viaplay, depending on the region where you operate, and the vendors, the service providers that are endorsed. And then, in fact, the passengers have a choice. This little bit depends on the offering of the streaming provider. Of course, everyone has their own native app that will then work on board in this preferred mode. Everyone will give your passengers a certain selection of their favorite movies as free to use for your passengers. So this is, let's say, the value that the streaming providers are paying you for getting enabled on board. And of course, for those who have subscribed, who normally take away most of your bandwidth, they will in future no longer take away your valuable bandwidth because, in fact, they are served by the CDN. So this is how the service works. And with that, I'd like to come to another point. We've spoken about the technology that we provide to launch just any digital service on board, RailStack. We had the example of how can I leverage on commercial streaming providers so that I actually create value for the passengers riding on my train. And the last element I like to focus today is something that is a bit classical, and maybe some part of the industry haven't really focused on this too much, but the plain classic old selling coffee and drinks, and or maybe merchandise or whatsoever. So driving new revenue with, let's call it, new catering concept or F&B concept. Now, obviously, on long distance operations, you already will have catering, you will have a restaurant car or bistro car, etc. And so in these cases, you could use part of this, but we're actually targeting operations where you don't have full service on board, or where your full service is in fact creating a lot of cost and is not so brilliant. Listening to let's say, to passenger feedback. Or to even create opportunities in regional rail travel where dwell time is half an hour, 45 minutes, where there's actually some opportunities in the market. Now, where we're coming from is quite a bit of research data where, especially, and this became apparent during the COVID crisis, that people have, of course, obviously a choice of travel, which mode of travel to use. And we're trying to bring them back to rail travel. And the feedback of people is very often, well, we have a choice, but make it worthwhile for me to travel. Give me the experience. And as part of the experience, in fact, if you hit the right catering, let's say, good products, price is not really that important. I mean, it cannot be over expensive, but good products, you need to hit the liking of your passenger. Then, in fact, the catering itself, the F&B process, will be a value add, even in services where today you would never, in fact, think of adding a restaurant car or bistro car. And in fact, that's just the point, because the classical F&B operation is very cost intensive. You need special rolling stock. And what we have been looking for is an experience that counts to the passenger. So something where you distinguish yourself from the competition, a service that can easily blend with the existing rolling stock, so something that works on every single rail car you have. Thirdly, something that's flexible and adaptive, because there's no such thing as a service a passenger likes today and for the next 20 years. It will need to move with the taste of your passengers. And obviously, the absolute lowest production cost for F&B service delivery, because the last thing you want is rolling something out and then subsidizing it. So how does IP networks and Wi-Fi play a role in that? What we've created, and this is this additional contract where we haven't named the rail company yet, but you'll find out maybe later in 2022 or whenever the guys are ready to go and launch it on their trains. So on the one hand side, there is a passenger experience that in fact is a classical web-based experience. You could add it to you see this on the left, so this is one solution element. You can add it to the portal, you can add it to your application. You may have this if you operate a restaurant car today, that you have a menu card or something, but it's a bit more, because the concept there is that you order at seat, you buy, you pay, and actually you go and collect it from a pickup point in the train. Obviously, you can have other delivery modes, but this is how the service has been designed. The second element is that together with a partner, we are providing containers that in fact incorporate the IT functionality, the inventory management, whatever you need. Rail approved containers that roll on, roll off, where the only thing you need to do is you need to provide fastening points in your carriages, and then you are in business. Small size, easy to handle, easy to move through stations with corresponding loading gear if needed. Sometimes it's not needed, depending a bit on the platform height. And then thirdly, a completely integrated IT production platform. This includes the forward-facing sales to the passenger. It includes the point of sales and payment. It includes the inventory management. It includes the management of the back office and the reporting. It's everything all in one into a single application, which coincidentally is hosted again on RailStack. You can host it on board of your train in that node, in that server I spoke about earlier, but you can in fact even host it in your little F&B container if you want. So how does that look like? So as I said, assume you have your regional train, passengers at their seat. In fact, you have a screen, let's say, that you have on the left-hand side of this display. You notice there that, in fact, there is a little display of the journey, the next station, etc. I'll explain that the reason for this in a moment. So effectively, this works like a web shop. It shows the inventory that can be purchased. You would go through, select, you buy, you pay electronically only, and then the system generates a QR code on your phone. You go to the pickup point, a little bit like delivery at McDonald's, if you like. But I mean, you can of course create the right kind of ambience for this, and collect the order they have built, that they have paid for. Now, the reason why there is this journey indicator is that the system is unique in being able not only to sell the inventory that is in the trolleys, and of course only show for sale what is actually there. I mean, you don't really want to sell something, someone comes and there's nothing left. So this is taken care of. There is two additional modes the system has. One, you can replenish during journey. So let's say you have bakery items, and every third station, a local baker will deliver a box of fresh croissant. The system can handle that, so you can actually always have fresh bakery or local products that you sell as per the journey goes, and then it appears in the shop or it vanishes as it is sold. And the second item is, it may not be a good idea for everyone, but it's an idea to start thinking about additional services. And one of our customers is in fact developing an approach like that, that let's say, suppose you have a journey time of 6 or 7 hours, somewhere halfway, you are cooperating with a restaurant. Passengers can order ready-made fresh meals. They are in fact ordered and paid for on the train. You actually can see on this indicator how much time you have left to order and at what point in time it will be available in the train for pickup. The restaurant, of course, produces the meals, packs them, delivers them to the train, and the same process applies. So you have an enormous amount of versatility and creativity and flexibility in this process, because we're not a catering company, as you noticed when I introduced ourselves. We just provide the platform. You do with it what you want. If you want to sell local artist work and then whatever, you can sell what you want. If we go to the next page, that's an example of a layout. This is one of the projects we're working on. This is part of a regional train. You see in the center the area which is like a multi-purpose area that is used for handicapped access, and handicapped passengers can park there, can sit there. You have the extended toilet, and next to it, in fact, you have another multi-purpose area that you could use for storage of bicycles, for example. Into this space, you can roll those dark brown containers, which are the containers I spoke about. And in fact, when you have those containers stocked, in fact, throughout the Wi-Fi system, you're actually deploying a service that in many ways will probably do better than many of the F&B competitors you have out there in the market. You may wonder, how does it look like in practice? So this is the same train. You see those containers. I said you don't see the locking mechanism, but it's locked into the train so that it can be approved. The containers themselves are obviously approved for rail logistics, etc. These containers are totally self-sufficient. So if, for example, you have a coffee machine integrated, you have the clean water, the wastewater, the waste, everything is inside a container. You have containers for cold drinks, for food and other items. In fact, we have a number of options because I said we work with partners to actually build those containers. You can have them with sliding fronts, with drawers, etc., and effectively build your own fleet. You would then have a depot somewhere where the train starts, where those containers are filled. You bring them fresh onto the train, and then after the journey, you bring them back to the depot, get the cleaning done. All garbage, everything leaves the train with a container. After the catering is over, the train is clean. And if next day you use it on a route where you don't want to have catering, well, then there is none. So this is basically the concept. Now, today's topic is about IP and networks, etc. So not so much about the containers, but the important point is the value here is that everybody in the train is in fact seeing the service, is able to buy immediately, and in fact, together with the intelligent logistics concept, you can generate not only additional ancillary revenues, but in fact provide quite a boost for passenger experience. And this brings me about to the end, I think, of the time I'm supposed to use. So we have time for Q&A, and I would like to invite Katrina.
Hi,
Questions.
thank you so much for the presentation, Ralph. I think that was a really insightful presentation. If anyone does have any questions or sort of details that they would like Ralph to expand on, then do submit a question. We've had a couple come through already. So first of all, Ralph, could you clarify the advantage of your solution for the entertainment versus the sort of more traditional setup of developing a portfolio of content for a portal?
Yes, of course. So, I mean, first of all, one thing that I already mentioned is for a portal that has my own content, I always need someone to manage my content, which is some amount of cost, but most importantly, I need to procure the content and load the content, and there's definitely cost associated to that. And this leads normally to, let's say, not the latest movies and let's say cinema-like hits for obvious reasons, because they may not be available or they may be too expensive. If I have a CDN app-based approach, in fact, I don't pay anything for the content because the engagement rules with the operators we support are such that the operators bring, let's say, the first 3 installments of the latest series, a selection of latest movies, some live content, depending on what they have, but attractive content, because to them it's kind of representing what they can do to people who are not yet subscribers. This content is available to everyone on board of the train for free. And obviously the rest of the subscriber content is cached in the way I have explained before. So number one is cost. Cost for content is saved. The second thing is the streaming bandwidth, where before on a portal, I'm eager to represent my content and get people to use my own content. I can nonetheless not avoid that there's a certain proportion of my passengers who still use the streaming and eat away the bandwidth. And so effectively, in the end, I have a load of on my Wi-Fi that I don't want to have. If I leverage on the CDN-based approach, I have content and I'm taking load out. So I'm actually either making more use available to the bandwidth I have, or in fact, I just save some money. And the last point to consider is, if we're really honest and we look at the statistics, at least those that we've seen, then in the actual uptake in terms of portal, as glamorous it may be, is usually quite restricted, quite low. And if we look at the use of streaming services, it is high, and it's always going to be higher than what I have in the portal. Now, if it's about passenger expectation, I would want to promote things that people like most and enjoy. And this is, from my point of view, one of the most compelling arguments why it's a good idea to think about using CDN-based approach.
Okay, I think that answers the question quite fully. So someone else has asked whether you already have agreement with the content owners such as Prime or Now TV or whoever it would be, or is that the responsibility of the transport operator?
No, we take care of those agreements. In fact, those names that we mentioned, depending on where you operate, I'm pretty confident. I mean, it depends a little bit in terms of the country you're operating in and the size of the operation. But for those where you've seen the names earlier, I'm pretty sure I can arrange the deals. There's others we are in discussion with. We also have a public TV in some countries that we're getting support with. But you know, it's at an early stage. I'm pretty sure that once a rail operator comes and says, in my country, I would like to have it, chances are high that at least most of the streaming operators are willing to do it. Maybe still with a small exception, the number one in the market, Netflix, is still a bit holding out, but they're looking at it. And
Okay.
the market is super competitive. In fact, we are in discussion also with Netflix, but I have to say at this time, I don't have any agreement with them. But
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if once we have a couple of fleets of operators operating with Prime or whomever, they will come. So,
let's hope so.
yeah.
So someone else has asked if you can control the video quality of streamed content to reduce the bandwidth. Is that something that you can have control over?
We would have control, but actually, so far our policy is not to control it because the delivery is local. I mean, it's a good question because we would have to look at the train context. Obviously, if I have lots of cached content that streams locally, then I will consume more local bandwidth, which means my Ethernet on board, my switches and my cables need to carry the load. Now, if I have cabled my train with a 100 megabit network, I will still hit the ceiling. Then indeed, we need to control the bandwidth, and we can. But normally we encourage everyone and say, try to at least have a 1 gigabit. If you have a 10 gigabit, you can do magical things, but it depends on what you have. And we can adjust to that. And in fact, we can control this, yes.
Okay. And then a final question that we've had come through is, you mentioned passengers using APP to view content. Would this also work on a browser?
Yes, but that depends on the streaming operator. So some endorse it and it works and others not. So we really need to look at the special case.
Okay, so it's a case by case.
Yes and no.
Sure.
Because we are not the providers of the content. So effectively, you need to think about it as the streaming provider using their software to get embedded in the train. And obviously they are effectively the people delivering. So we need to see how their software blends and integrates into the environment. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's desired by the streaming operator, sometimes not. We need to have a closer discussion to answer that.
Sure. Okay, well, I think that's been a really insightful presentation. Obviously, there are contact details there below, or if anyone's got any questions, they can get in touch with the Terrapin team and we'll gladly put you in touch with Ralph and his team. You'll also be joining us at Passenger Festival in Amsterdam later this year if you want to meet you in person. But otherwise, the recording of this webinar will be available. You can share that with colleagues. I think it will be available from tomorrow. You'll all be emailed a link. So thank you, Ralph, for your time and your insight. Hopefully that's been useful to everyone. And yeah, we look forward to hopefully seeing you in person not too long from now. And yeah, enjoy the Easter break.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing everyone in Amsterdam, or in fact, if if there's a possibility at IT Trans or InnoTrans, or all three events, even better.
Yes, lots of events to look forward to. Perfect. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.